Well, somebody has to do it.
That's right, you raise my tax dollars, I want results. I'll hold that company and you guys do it.
We'll just give it another couple minutes to make sure if anyone else wants to join us.
Hey, what'd you do with our bearded guy?
He's gone. Left.
Hey.
Pretty good, how are you?
You have a hard copy for those in the very back row, because there's so little room, right?
Yeah.
You'll get a few more at the next one.
Than anything. Everybody. Well, I think it's, I live on California, so the two things. Have a driveway, or take two houses out and put one more, enter into that.
I'll kick it off.
Sure, after they.
We need a town meeting. We need a town meeting.
I've got a number of those comments.
Yeah. And after that, people are like, well, we don't need any growth. Well, let me see. When I left in 61, after my freshman year, we had 2,000 people here. So where would the rest of us be?
Yeah.
I just moved back in 2003 over there that they built more homes.
Yeah, it was really.
Oh, when I grew up here, I mean, we had, Bingston's, we had Mrs. Binder's, we had Johnston's, we had a meat market, we had a shoe store,
It was good, Dan.
Yeah.
The meat market's on its way back, right?
It's still good.
We getting the meat market? Yeah.
Austin should be coming in.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
And then they built,
Austin's meat market.
then they built a thing that was before their time, which I don't know if a lot of people remember. Down here by the winery, they kind of built a thing that was like in Monterey. It had all the little shops in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, yeah, it had, yeah.
Had a couple of bars in it.
Yeah, and then it just never took off, but it was kind of like the same thing as.
We used to walk up that Friday.
Yeah. I had never, there's not enough people. It was nice the way they did it. Monterey and Escalon.
We'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us for the early session of the fiscal year 24-25 budget workshop. It's called a workshop. It's a format. It's a word that's used so we can allow the public to participate in the process. It's really a presentation. It's an opportunity for those who are interested, and we are live on YouTube right now. It's an opportunity for those who are interested to get kind of a sneak peek into the budget prior to it going to council for consideration. I won't say approval, consideration on June 17th. That is the target now. So what we want to do is sort of present it in a draft form prior to the council consideration. Give the public an opportunity to kind of mull over it a little bit, think about it, and then ask, present any comments, questions they have at the council meeting on June 17th. We also have a presentation at 6 o'clock to provide opportunity for those who may be working at this time to participate. That's kind of the format. We do have Celinda Bickner here, who's the new finance director and HR administrator who will go through the budget presentation. I think she'll say, ask questions as we go along.
Definitely.
If you have any questions, or we can definitely answer questions or collect thoughts that you have afterwards as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Celinda, and we do have the presentation on the screen.
Yes. Thank you all for joining us. I know the room is packed, but find a place. Let's start with our first slide. We begin every budget cycle with the council's objectives. It gives us a roadmap as to what we're asked to do. And in this case, we were asked to provide a balanced budget. So your handout shows that in the general fund, we were able to do that. It incorporates the council and city manager's goals, and we wanted to try to keep this budget process open and easy to understand. It doesn't have to be difficult. We can make it easy with graphs and with all of our handouts. And one of the other things we're asked to do is just to try to maximize the investment opportunities. So that's something that's crucial for the city in order to have enough revenues to meet all the expenses that we have for all the different types of funds. So we'll go on to our next slide.
And I'll just add a couple of comments. So in the last couple of budget cycles, it has not been a balanced budget. We all know of the loss of Tom Hillier Ford and the hit to sales tax that we have and the increasing costs of services. We have not had balanced budgets. And so we, with this sort of new leadership team, have taken a really close look at having a balanced budget. And that's what you will see today. It's a balanced budget, but that comes at some cost. And so we'll walk through that. And then just want to hit on maximize investment opportunities. This is something that Celinda has taken a close look at. All cities have, sort of monies available in the bank that we're able to do things with. Now, there are certain laws and rules. We can't openly invest, like you would privately, but there are some opportunities and there's some maybe missed opportunities that we are looking at improving. So we'll walk through some of that as well in the presentation.
Very good point. Okay, our next slide. These are our Escalon council members. And we have this will be loaded online. You'll be able to link and click on each person's name and go directly to their email if you have a comment or something that you would like to add. We have our mayor, David Bellinger, Andrew Hagan, our mayor pro tem, Melinda Walker, council member, Jeremy Engel, council member, and Sean Stroman, council member. Next slide, let's see. Budget tools. This whole process is just one large tool financially so that we can get the best use out of the money that comes through the city. We want to make sure that we're able to meet all the needs, meet all the services, and so staff has developed this proposed budget based on policy direction from the council. Again, balanced budget, meeting all the needs, meeting all the services, and it'll run from July 1st of 2024 through June 30th of the 2025. We're trying to make sure that we can communicate a very clear plan, what we intend to spend, what we have spent, and the revenues that we are expecting to receive. So with all this together, this is our budget tool. Right now for this proposed annual budget, we're looking at about $34.3 million, and our capital improvement budget consists of about 20.9. So that's all of the major projects and things that you see going on throughout the city, and those might span multiple years. There's a full listing of that at the very end of this. It's a rather long list, so we'll get to it. Next slide we have is for our fiscal policies. This basically lets us know what our management and operational goals are irrespective of the budget. These are all the things that we need to do, maximizing our revenues, making sure that our fees for services are accurate and correct, our fund maintenance, we don't want to commingle or mix our general fund dollars with all the other funds. We want to make sure that all those expenses are adequately separated. That's our cost allocation. We want to make sure that everything's accurate, and the transparency portion is something that we're doing tonight. We want to make sure that we share our information with as many people as who want to come join us. And investments. We want to adhere to both the state laws and the city policies, but we also want to have prudent investment strategies that are putting the city's monies to work for us every day. Operational efficiencies. One of the things that I've tried to focus on this particular cycle is looking through all the operational costs for cost savings, seeing if there's anything where we can remove something that we're not using or reduce costs for things that we do need. Utilizing contractors when higher levels of services can be obtained at a lower cost is one way to do that. Instead of hiring a full-time person, we can perhaps contract out some of these smaller tasks that we need done. And seeking out joint operations with other cities or our own county. That's a great way to reduce costs. Utilizing our revenues that are obtained through all the different avenues that we have by voters, by taxes that are collected, utilizing them to the best ability that we can for each program. And the last one, establish appropriate rates and assessments to fund the city's operational and maintenance needs. Let's see, we have our policies continued. Our reserves right now are set at 33% of the general fund operating expenses. I would like to, as a goal, increase that to 40% over the next 5 years so that there's more of a cushion for uncertainties. We found in COVID a lot of places, a lot of cities, a lot of businesses found that they really did need that extra cushion. So over the next 5 years, it would be nice to increase that, and that's going to be one of our goals. Infrastructure. Provide sufficient yearly routine maintenance funding for infrastructure projects. This goes along with our CIP budget or our capital improvement project budget. Having the required amount of money set aside to pay for the upkeep of all these projects is something that we would like to work into the next budget. I would like to show exactly what's required for each project and ongoing expenses that will be required to keep them up. Employee development. We'd like to retain our skilled employees by providing a professional and safe working condition, adequate training opportunities, and competitive salaries. We'd like to award salary increases on individual merit and job performance as funding allows. And lastly, for our economic development. Attracting new businesses that will generate sales tax is a great way to increase the revenues for the city after the large loss of revenue. Finding places that will come in to replace that lost revenue is about $1 million of the general fund budget is from sales tax, so about 20%. That's something to consider when we're looking at new businesses. I really think that the ultra-low crime rate and the established base of local tourism and the residents here would attract some larger businesses. It's just something throughout the year we're going to have to see who we can find. We'd like to adopt an Escalon first purchasing policy, giving preferential bidding status to Escalon businesses. This keeps the dollars local. It keeps our local businesses engaged with the city, and perhaps it will attract future businesses that will help with that sales tax base. Okay, we have a fund description here, fairly dry, but we have our general funds, our enterprise funds that make up things like the water, sewer, storm, and public transit. Our special revenue funds are monies that are earmarked for a specific use, and we find them kind of mixed throughout. We have our development impact funds. Those are collected to offset expenses that can be directly linked to new development. Those types of funds are used for all kinds of different things, but when growth comes into the city, anything that is affected by that growth, we can use those funds for in various ways. The landscape lighting and development funds, we have some people here from the Bellaterra area. These are funds that are collected through property tax. So here accuracy is great for collecting all the different expenses that go for that particular area, and keeping a nice accurate listing of all that helps us keep that sales tax amount lower, or not, sorry, sales tax, the property tax. And the debt service funds. Those are used to track the long-term debt principal and interest transactions that we have for a couple different loans. Okay, this particular slide shows all the funds that we have. Their asset balance, their cash balance. It shows their fund balance, their estimated revenues. It gives you everything you can think of for all the different funds that we have. And that's where we're getting our large numbers of the 17.7 for revenues is what's anticipated. We have our different expenses. The CIP budget, that's 20.9 million. But one of the interesting things that we have here is it shows that of the 55.7 million worth of assets that we have our cash is 24.9. So when we go to pay bills for the city, we have that 24.9 million to use to pay the bills, even though our fund balance in general is much higher. And that includes assets, things that we own like cars, buildings, everything that you see around you that you can touch. Those types of things will help grow that fund balance, but the cash is what we really use to move the city forward and to pay the bills. So this particular slide gives us everyone's cash balance at the 6/30/24. And we have this broken down in another slide. One of the things that we talk about is our sales tax. And I wanted to show how the city as a whole was down quite a bit for the timeline ending in December 31st. Sales tax data is usually far behind actual data. So we have this information a few months behind actual, but the statewide number, the statewide sales tax was actually down 2.9%. So while our city sales tax was down quite a bit because of the loss of the one vendor, overall, even San Joaquin County was down. So it wasn't a good time frame for sales tax. But we can see where the graphic shows us that the declines were in the transportation, much as we would expect, and general retail and construction only dropped slightly. So it was really that large hit that we took in the transportation sector. Here's our general fund dashboard. So this will show that our revenues and our expenses are equal for this budget, and it does show where the expenses lie. We can see one of the smaller code enforcement is only $3,000, whereas police is one of the larger at $3 million. And we'll also here on these pie charts, we can see where our total taxes, not just sales tax, but all taxes collected, work about 75% of the revenues collected. So that's the franchise fees, the sales taxes, property taxes, occupancy taxes, all those things combined make up a great portion of the revenues for the general fund. And these small areas here, while they are small, they do help to fund, like the recreation area. They're able to draw in that $180,000 there, and that helps to fund all of those services that are really vital for the city. Go on to the next. This again shows the general fund, and we can see over the years historically from 2021 through current how we have this roller coaster of fund balance, surplus, and deficit. We are in our proposed meeting a zero here, so we have our revenues and expenses meeting, but we have had kind of a rocky history with that particular line. Nice and curvy there. That's not what we want to see. Funds with the modest increases like recreation show higher revenues for 23-24, and that kind of proved that they did in fact have the funds and the revenue to support their activities. And even though this graphic does show that we have a balanced revenue and expense, it comes at quite the cost. It's a bare bones type of budget, and there was $515,000 cut. So we'll talk about what was cut from that next. And by the way, does anyone have any questions so far? No? Okay, I'll keep plugging along then. This slide shows our cuts. And we can see that some of the largest cuts were in the police department. And as we noticed before, that was one of our largest expense centers as well. So that kind of tracks. But we have vehicle replacements, tech replacements, general operating expenses, all those things were cut. And in fact, we've called this kind of a hiring freeze, but we don't expect to hire any new positions in this particular budget. So while services would remain the same with this type of bare bones cutback budget, there isn't going to be any increases.
And I'll just add some color here. It's a balance when you're budgeting. We don't want to see overspending. We don't want to see negative budgets. So we're balancing right sizing the expenditures that we have. So we may need car replacements, but in this budget, when we don't have the revenues to match our expenditures, we have to go without car replacements, for instance. You know, if there's positions that we haven't filled for a while, even though we'd like to fill them, if we don't have the revenues, we're not going to fill those positions. So I want to present a case that we haven't just gone in and, you know, just slashed things off the top. We've really gone in and sort of surgically looked at where we had room to cut. For instance, we were spending many thousands of dollars on phone lines that we found a new, option that we saved $50,000, right? In
Very close.
phone line.
Due to the chief.
In phone line expenditure. So it's that sort of detailed look at the budget and cost savings that we've looked at. And so, yeah, the 250,000 in police looks like a big number, and it is a big number, as well as 100,000 in planning. But we've gone and tried to find areas that we could cut without a loss of service, without a degradation of service to the community.
Can we elaborate a little bit more on what those
Sure, I'll say for the corporation yard, I know that one for certain is operational expenses. So in a prior budget, they may have said, okay, you're gonna have 60,000 for whatever operational item. Let's just say it's office supplies, because that's my big pet peeve. And we don't need that. So the actuals for the year that I was looking at may have been 6,000 or 7,000. So in that particular area, you would say, well, okay, maybe in a prior year we did spend that because we bought a copy machine or something. But we don't need that amount of money. And looking historically back, we can see, well, okay, that was a one-off, and you only spend about 6,000 or 7,000 a year here. So there's some things like that where those monies would have been shifted between different items that were being purchased for operations, but they weren't needed, and we could cut back. Things like phone lines. One of the things we've done recently is with credit card fees. I was able to reduce those from about $1,000 a month taken off just by simply categorizing them properly. We're not selling anything here, we're collecting utility fees. So because of that, we can get a different rate. We just weren't getting that rate. So those take, and like the chief can attest to, I'm sure getting those phone lines reduced down in cost takes quite a lot of time. We had some other phone lines that were operating that would have hit that courtyard also that just reduced those fees from, I think one was a $350 bill down to $20 a month. So small pennies when you're looking at the $5 million for that $350. But overall, if we could go through and cut these things. So you have some things like that for Corp Yard. Community Center had some other things too.
So real quick, so what we did is we looked at actuals over the last 3 to 5 years.
What was budgeted versus what was spent?
Yeah, and sometimes budgets just get carried over, sort of without much thought. And we looked at the actuals and right-sized that, not just the budget number carried over, but looked at the actuals of what we were spending, and then went through with all the department heads and said, where are you going to spend here? Where are you not going to spend? And so there were a lot of, kind of what we're calling operational cuts of things we just probably didn't need to. Maybe we can talk about community center, but planning, I know we had budgeted the housing element in last year. We're not going to do another housing element. So that was a relatively easy cut. And then in police, we talked about most of them, 50,000 for the phone line. There was
Automobile?
60,000 for the
New
automobile.
automobile.
And there was one budget line that they were, I don't know why it was so high, but it was historically budgeted for like 70,000. But of the past several years, we've only been spending between 15 to 20,000 out of it. So it's like, why are we putting 70,000 in this fund when we're only spending 20,000 out of it? So that was a $50,000 savings right there.
So the right sizing really encompasses quite a bit of looking through what did we actually spend, what vendors did we actually spend this money with. And yeah, that's right, we didn't really spend as much as was budgeted for, so we don't need that money on that budget line. Let's move that someplace else. So we can see where recreation and streets and buildings increased a little bit, but on the other side of that, we can go back to the community center. They had a couple personnel line items on there that we don't have any longer. And we could find that too. I think the corporation yard had maybe one person listed on there that we're not going to fill that spot. So taking away these and not funding positions that we don't have the money to fund at this point really was able to cut this down to where we could meet the revenue number.
And that's the sort of right sizing. What it also means is, yes, freezing positions that we haven't filled. It means not replacing some of our equipment and technology that is probably due for replacement, vehicles, those types of things. In the community center, corporation yard, it means not making some deferred maintenance type improvements. But it was really our goal to get to, kind of a zero budget, and that's what we did.
Zero gives us a starting point. So we're very optimistic that we can keep that, but at mid-year when we present the same type of information again, we'll be able to see what we have done, what changes we've been able to make and reductions in operating costs and things to maybe find some money that's needed in other areas. I'm hopeful. The other thing is with the tax initiative being voted on, this would help fund police. So all these areas that we've cut, that particular tax initiative would provide the revenue needed to support current line items and things that we are going to need in the future in order for any type of growth. There are certain cars that we have and things, the different police cars that need to be replaced within the next few years. So in the back of my mind, when I'm finding money and looking, I'm going to be trying to earmark some of that for those vehicles that we need for this kind of a needs list. We have to say, and what do we really, really need to replace? Maybe it's a computer, maybe it's a car, maybe it's something, servers. We're going to have to find the money to do that. So I'm kind of stashing that away on a list and saying, find the money for it.
And just to add to that and bring back something that was said before, the general fund reserve, that puts the city in a position to weather any storm, right? There was a COVID storm recently and a Great Recession storm recently, right? We want to be able to weather storms, and 33% I think is a pretty good number. I'd love to get it, to a little bit healthier of a number, and it's about us finding ways to, over time, make those more healthy. So right size our budget, start, I'll call it squirreling away money for things that we need. Make our reserve better, start on deferred maintenance for streets and facilities and all that, because we don't want to kick that can too far down the road either. So if we can get the budget, kind of what Celinda said, to a starting point, then we can start building towards a more sustainable future.
So let's see, that was 515,000 in those cuts. I think we've talked about all those. There we go. Next slide. This is our fund balance and claim on cash analysis. So it is a little into the weeds here because we do show all the money that the city has and where it currently is. So right now we have a bank account just like anybody else would have a bank account. We use that to pay the bills with. And then we have two investment accounts. One is with the state and the other is with an investment group. And we've got Oak Valley Bank, pays us 0 interest. That's the money that we use to pay the bills with every day. Our CSJVRMA investments, it's the same fund that funds, what is that called? Workman's Comp. And the other one is the State Treasury. The acronym is LAIF. We'll go into this one on another slide. It will actually let us use the same investment power that the State Treasury uses. So that's a nice one.
Are we looking at other interest-bearing accounts?
Oh, yes, we are.
Okay, just making sure.
I have a meeting this Thursday. I think we both to talk with the local banks to see just what we can do. And of course, there's certain things that we can't invest in. We talked about that a little earlier, but there are a lot of things that we can, so that we can make, you can kind of add the two numbers there, 10 and 13. We've got about 23 million. Yeah. Those dollars should be working every day to provide interest income of some sort for the city. And I think that would really be beneficial in a bunch of different areas. So.
And I just want to control, expectations a little bit. There's absolutely things that we are looking into. We think there's an opportunity here. There's sort of a limited world of things that we can do, and then an even more limited world of things that would be prudent for a city to do, across all the taxpayer, monies. So we want to highlight the issue that you'll see, nice segue. We want to highlight the issue that you'll see in the next couple of slides, and then start developing, a long-term strategy with the council and the community over time.
One thing I skipped over here with fund balance, we can see how the dark blue and the light blue present assets, the fund balance is the light blue, and then the green is the cash. So you can kind of see represented there, really, the cash that's available to pay the bills is not this entirety of this fund balance number that we're looking at. So that really kind of hones in that we have a lot of assets, which is great, and we have this smaller cash, the little green block there. So we really need to nurture that cash and make sure that it's working for the city as best as possible. This particular slide gives a bunch of information about the LAIF, the Local Agency Investment Fund. This is through the state. It is through the Treasurer's Office investment pool that they have. The state can't borrow this money, and they can't deny the city back this money. If we call in and want to get this money returned to us, we can do that. And it doesn't depend on whether the state budget has gone through or not. So it's very protected in that sense. Currently, we've got about 13.4 million cash invested in the LAIF program, and these funds have earned about 241,000, or an average of about 1.79. Down at the bottom here, we can see where LAIF's interest rates for April are 4.272, but of course, this money has been in there throughout the fiscal year, so it hasn't had the benefit of that higher rate for the entire time. As rates increase, we'll be able to I really enjoy something closer to 4, but if rates start to decrease, then of course these rates will decrease also.
And those rates are underwritten on a 28-day.
It's a 30-day is what they run off of a banker's calendar. And they're looking at the month from the 1st through the 30th. And I don't know what they base this off of. They have all their information off of there, and it's their fund. So you'd have to look at every single stock and bond that's in their fund that they're, in order to see exactly what it's based off
It's not
of.
like they're in CDs or anything like that.
It would be a mix.
Lending out
And yeah, and because of that, you would think that the state treasury would have a really
money.
good.
Because like the reason why I asked is because like a general, like a retail bond fund would be, 5%, you know what I mean? Even for that kind of money on a 30-day period.
Yeah, and I'm not completely sure exactly what they have. Like, they have the different cities and counties and things listed here, but they didn't give a list of every single fund or option that they had in this. It's kind of like a mutual fund. It's a group. They're supposed to be very good at what they do. This is the state treasurer's office. So by investing in their fund, we're supposed to get their expertise on investments and everything that they've chosen and everything that they move around. So they're very transparent as far as what their rates are. I liked that part of it. So. But again, we can see how the rates go from fairly low to the 4.2. Now the next one, and we've got about 53% of the city's cash invested in this program also. This next slide shows Chandler Asset Management, and we have 43% of the city's cash investments with Chandler right now through the same pool that's used for workman's comp. And we can show that these monies are actually losing value over the current year. This is one of the reasons why I have asked our local banks to see just what we can do in order to get a better rate, something that's much higher for this 43% of the cash. This particular investment also has $16,000 average a year of fees. So, yeah, this is something that I would like to try and change, and it's going to take the work of the city staff and our local banks that we're going to try and find something better than what we have here. But again, as Jalen has said, we need to be cautiously optimistic of what kind of rates we are going to be able to get. As of right now, the April 30th balance, the loss for the fiscal year is the $254,522. So our total cost of investment with this particular, they call it a CUSIP. It's a number assigned to a group of stocks and things, much like a mutual fund also. So again, they have a grouping of all these different financial investments that they have put together in this pool, and it's That's CUSIP 99 CAMBX $1. So if you want to look it up, you can see the listing of all the different funds that are in there. It was too much to put on one slide, so. What else do we have? Okay, and that's about 11.4, we're balancing there. Hopefully we'll get something done with this soon. Our next slide here, we have summaries for each of the different funds. We've already looked at the general fund a little bit, but it shows us going back to 2020. So our fiscal year 2021 through current, we even have our listing of the mid-year, so we can see at mid-year we thought that our revenues were going to be about 5.1. We're proposing they're going to be about 5.3 based on actuals and some state information on sales tax that we've received. This particular fund is about 20% affected by the sales tax rates and collections and things like that. We have our year-to-date actuals here as of April 30th, so we have not an entire year here yet. What else? And we do have a net difference of 0. We talked about the cuts. Let's go on to our next slide here. We have the enterprise funds. These are all of our sewer, our water, our storm water. All these different areas have revenues and expenses, fund balances. They've got their major CIP budgets. And we have a little slide. Sure.
Can we go back to the previous slide?
Yes.
So, actual total taxes fiscal year 23, 24. $8.5 discrepancy.
That is through April 30th. And so because taxes are so far off, as we saw in some of our other slides, we will be receiving tax money for 23, 24 well into September. So we're going to have to accrue that money back into the year end so that we can account for it properly in the year. And then when we receive it, we would, just back that back out.
Is your estimation?
I think so, yeah, from what I've seen in the historicals and from the dates where we actually receive the money, yes. And we're receiving it currently, or in 2020, 22, 23, and 23, 24, we received it on kind of a cash basis. As soon as we got it, we posted it. Because we didn't have staff here in the office to accrue things back and forth into their proper years. So going forward, we will, and we'll have a better accounting of, last year we got this exact amount of money for this year. And we'll be able to go forward with that and anticipate payment dates, dollar amounts for the fiscal years, things like that, a little more accurately than just cash basis posting it the day that we get it, type of thing. So that's where you're going to find that large swing.
And just to make clear, as we move from the general fund into the enterprise fund, so the general fund is where it's your sort of public fund. It's where your taxes go, and it's the fund that the city has the most discretion with. As we get into our enterprise funds, those are services for a fee or ratepayers. So specifically for water, you pay your water bill to receive the water service. The general fund is what most people think of as the city budget, and that's why we spent the most time on that. But we'll also go over the enterprise funds.
Okay, so enterprise does have a good fund balance. We can see that's, a good portion of that. We can look at our revenues and expenses. Our expenses are less than the revenues we anticipate. We do have also those capital improvement budgets. So we have those budgets that are going to be eaten up over several years, and we have the revenues and expenses for the current year. So that nice gain that we see there between the 10 million and the 7 is going to be used for that $10 million capital improvement budget. And that's, like we were discussing, that's only going to be for sewer, water, the transit system, things like that. These are very specific funds that are earmarked for just these purposes here.
And unlike the general fund, the way these work is, you really stockpile money at times to get to your big project. If you need to replace a street, a water line, a wastewater treatment plant, something like that, you sort of build up. So sometimes, the revenues won't meet the expenses, oftentimes because you're building up to that next, major replacement.
Have our Next slide here. So we're going through our different types of funds. We have our enterprise funds here the same way we showed the general fund with actuals for the prior years. What our mid-year budget is for last cycle. That mid-year budget was the last budget that council approved. That's why we use that in here as our last good number. Actuals for year-to-date, again, are only through April. But you can see right here, between 22-23 and 23-24, we're fairly close. Down through our net difference, there's that $3 million that we need to use for our capital improvements budget. It would be nice if that was higher, but as we noticed, those capital improvements are going to be done over several years, so we have some time to catch up. Special revenue funds, these are all the typically smaller funds, but we do have things like the COPS LEAF Fund, transportation, regional transport impact fees, a bunch of different, or Measure K is one that we hear about a lot in the news of different funding that they have for that, the gas tax fund. So these are going to be much smaller. They do have higher revenues and expenses. A lot of these are transferred out to meet the expenses for their companion funds. Specifically, some of these ones that would go for the police department would be transferred over, things of that nature. Let's keep on going here. Here's our next slide. Development impact fees. These are monies that can only be used to offset expenses that have come about because of new development or the maintenance of that new development. So again, small dollar amounts. These usually have transfers to meet other expenses and things. So we do have a zero balance here between the two because of those companion transfers that are going to meet expenses that have been put in other funds. We have the park development, something that would be transferred to the parks for expenses that are done there for those types of activities. Let's see our next one, the assessment districts. Good, I was hoping we had one of these in here. So here's our line for Bellaterra. We can see our actual revenues would be collections from property taxes, and then our actual expenses. You see my proposed expenses based on actuals are fairly low compared to the revenue that's expected. I believe this is two reasons. Actuals are comprised of what is posted into that particular fund, and if we have something that's posted into general funds, perhaps on accident, like the fill for the play areas, the rubber or the bark, that got put into the general fund. It needs to actually be put into these individual funds for the different parks. So moving those expenses over to where they should be, maintenance hours that it took, we haven't moved any of those over. These types of things will increase the expenses in these areas to be more accurate and will eat up some of that gain of that 115. So that comes back to our accuracy portion. We need to be very careful when we're posting these expenses that we can cut them out to the right district as opposed to putting them in the general fund. What else do we have? Positions. So these are all the different positions that we have in our budget. What we're actually funding are filled positions. We're not funding anything that's not filled, and that helped with those budget cuts. We can see where we've only have about, I think it's 42 positions here, but everybody's time is cut up against the different funds that they provide services for. So you might have one office assistant or one accountant or one, we have maintenance worker. We can see where we have these particular things split up between streets and storm. Transit is 100%, the one person, it's part-time. And then police, of course, most of our police here are going to be 100%. And then we have some management, it's cut up against the different funds. So in doing this, helps us to spread these expenses to where they're most accurate. And this type of thing will change around to meet, perhaps parks might have a couple hours that are going to the districts instead of just in parks. We'll have to move that in order to make those expenses come out correctly. And what else do we have? We do have our capital improvements project. This is a summary, and I've listed a few of the projects here on the side, just so we can kind of see what we're talking about here. We have the Water Enterprise Fund, we've got our sewer, storm, transit, and what we're using the gas tax monies for. And of course, we have down here this little parks fund. You can see that that's in 204. That probably should be in one of the districts rather than sitting there, so. These are just things that as we make better and better accurate transactions for all these different things for the budget, we get a much better picture of exactly what expenditures go to every fund. Sure. There's a lot on that slide, huh?
There is. Checking for accuracy. 4 slots for city council. Is there a slot? It's kind of far away, but.
City manager.
Good eye.
Good eye, yeah, I only see 4 as well. You would think it'd be under M for mayor, right? City manager, maintenance office.
I don't see it. We'll look at that.
Granted, it's a small.
We'll have to look for that. Good eye. Let me write that down real quick here. Okay. Thank you for that. Okay. Next one over here, CIP. And then after this summary of our capital improvements project, we've got some high-level numbers for roads and sewer and the general fund, how much is in there. We do have a detailed listing here that shows a couple years' worth of expenses. We can see what we've spent 2021, 2022, 23, and 24. We're pretty close in our estimation of what's going to be spent in this next budget. But it just gives a lot of history here.
Budget for Project X, how's that carried over from year to year? Actual that's utilized that year, and then the original budget is carried over, is the budget amended, like at the mid-year or at the full fiscal?
Currently, what we have is the entire budget line, and we have phases. So you might have one of the street projects out here, and phase 1 is going to be done in year 2021, phase 2 the next year, phase 3 the next year. So we're working that expense and eating away at that budget amount every year. And as it happens, some of these things have expenses added to them.
Right.
So they increase in expense, so then that's added. So you have this kind of living project going on until it's completed. Once it's put into service, we can put it into an asset and depreciate it. We could pull it out of our expenses, put it up into our assets. And like we talked about with fund balance, we've got our assets up in our fund balance, and we've got our cash and our expenses. So we're just moving it from one area to the next, and then we're able to expense that over whatever length of time we're able to for the type of project that it is. But we do have a lot of these things that go year to year, they have phases, or they might split between 2 years for a smaller project.
It's really handled in different ways. You know, a budget, in theory, is authority to spend. And so if we don't quite know if we're going to get, you know, a multi-year project done in 1 year or 2 years, it's best if the council agrees with the project to at least have the authority to spend that entire project in. Now, as we, you know, do quarterly kind of check-ins, which we'll do, you know, moving forward, and we do year end, we'll kind of clean up some of those things. You know, there won't be any double dipping or extra expenditures. It's just the budget tells you, here's what we're working on for this year, you know, community and council. Here's what we intend to spend. And if that project carries over, you know, if we've done half of it, then it'll be, you know, half the next year, for instance.
Budget timeline. This is a summary of a budget timeline, and one that I hope to get us into the practice of, where we have quarterly, if not budget cycles, we have budget check-ins. So with this is we're proposing this budget for the upcoming year. We've had our little meeting here. Next year, we will do this on a more orderly timeline, where we'll have this particular meeting much sooner in the process. We're going to establish our budgets. We'll get to refine them. We'll get to bring presentations. We'll get input from community and from council. And then we'll have these types of meetings again when we get closer to the year beginning. We were on a really adjusted timeline this year. So unfortunately, everything kind of got smushed together into all one month. But next fiscal year, we'll see a more methodical budget process that will help us to all have our input throughout the year.
And sort of singularly focused to get that 515,000. I mean, that's, a tenth of the budget, basically, the general fund budget, really, laser focused on trying to get that number down. And so as we mentioned, as we get to kind of this new baseline, then, we can build, as I mentioned before, kind of a more sustainable future with public input into the future.
I look forward to having some goals and priorities too brought forth by council and community, so that we have some tangible things that we can work towards and we can measure. Say we want to do X, Y, and Z, let's measure it, let's call it out and see if we can actually get that done within the fiscal year. So currently, right now, I think we're starting at a new base, and we'll go through with that and move forward and just complete these budget cycles and see how best we can serve the city with the dollars that we have running through here. Do I have anything else? Nope, that's it. So we do have the links on these pages on the PDFs and things if you want to make comments or email. Oh, thank you. And I've got my email address on there if you'd like to make direct comments. And that's what we have so far. So are there any questions or anything I can answer for anybody? Well, thank you. This was really fun being new to the city. I got to see everything and learn about all the different funds. So for me, this was really a great project to work on. Thank you.
Yeah, both of you have inherited a little bit of a mess in any book.
Some challenges, as a lot of cities do, but yeah, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. We could stop them right now.
Especially if they build that Murphy Ranch. And getting,
It'll be a fun meeting.
yeah.
Okay, well, our next one's at 6 o'clock. Shall we push the on-air button? There we go.